past. So the sun's photons are obviously the source of all life on Earth through photosynthesis. But we're particularly talking about the possibility of light being coherent, being organized and structured in a particular way, and being a carrier of information. You know, we can take a light beam, a photon, and put a radio signal, a TV signal on that and bounce it off the moon or whatever we want to do as a carrier wave. So photons are really the energy currency of the entire universe. And here we have the familiar electromagnetic spectrum that we're all taught in school, and we tend to think of light and photons being in that little visible area of color, but in fact, according to scientists, these are all photons. Radio waves are photons, gamma rays are photons, so light body may be made of a mixture of all of these different phenomena. And these are the 12 particles that are known to science to make up everything we see, and particularly these particular quarks and leptons over here, the three with the arrows, are the ones that make up atoms. The other ones are kind of appearing and disappearing under experimental conditions. And then we have the 4 different types of energy, the photon being the big one, and the gluon maybe sticking some things together, but the photon is the biggie. Extraordinarily, we've just in recent years, scientists have actually been able to take a picture of a light wave, and on the other hand, a picture of a photon. This is, again, about 2016, the first ever picture of a photon. See, it looks familiar, doesn't it? So there's Buddha worlds within the photon. And remember, though, that there is also the problem that all that we just saw is only about 5% of the known universe. The rest, there's something going on there, but we don't know what it is. Maybe it's called the quantum vacuum or dark matter, dark energy, but that still needs to be discovered. So here we get into the good stuff. Every living cell emits light or photons. They call ultra-weak photon emissions. Now they can be measured. And these are information carriers. It's coherent light that regulates the whole of our biochemistry. The whole of our biology has to do with all kinds of molecular interactions. And our output of photons changes over the course of the day, our activities, and so on and so forth. And the interesting thing, too, is that it turns out that those photons communicate. So, for example, if you're ill, if someone next to you is ill, the photons they're transmitting to you are affecting your body. They've put a sick plant next to a well plant, and it affects it. So if anyone next to you is sick, please move away from them. And the body is very miserly with photons. A plant actually will emit 200 photons a second, but a human being, 1 or 2 photons a second. Why? Because we're using them. The more simple and crystalline the structure is, the less it's going to need or use the photons, which is why when people attain the light body in certain circumstances, the hair and nails do not attain light body because they do not use photons. They're crystalline in nature. They're not photonic. Fun stuff. So here's just a picture of incoherent light and coherent light when it's in the same frequency, the same wavelengths, and so on. And here we have some wonderful pictures of leaves and people with their photon emissions, showing different times of day the kind of radiation coming out of the body. But by the way, when you look online, you'll see all kinds of pictures that say, these Kirlian photographs show the photonic emissions. No, Kirlian photographs, which are taken under high voltage, just show the water content of the substance. That's why this quarter, this nickel here, is showing all this radiation, because it's wet. So don't believe that stuff. Where are we now? So we know that life on Earth exists because plants are autotrophic. They're able to take in light and turn it into energy and eventually into substance. But guess what? Now scientists know that when you eat plants, that chlorophyll stays in your bloodstream and actually takes in the light, and the cells use it. So that's the first time we've understood that you actually can get sunlight directly into your body as energy like a plant. And as a matter of fact, we know now that the melanin in the skin does the same thing. It has to do with the whole study of evolution of the species and changes in pigmentation, that we're actually able to use light and put it into our cells. Our eyes also take light, of course, and make it into chemical messages, but we also know that we emit light from our eyes, which is what was said by the medieval alchemists and other philosophers. Hemoglobin in the blood that carries our iron also is light sensitive. And light on the skin, very, very interesting, does produce a fourth form of water. So there's not just gas, liquid, solid, but there's a gel. And this gel is extremely important in the whole body For our purposes, it's particularly important because it's highly charged. In other words, by getting sunlight, your body turns into a powerful voltaic cell. There's a wonderful book called Light is Voltage and explains a lot of this as well. So, human beings eat light. Not moving. What happened? Still not moving. There? There's something wrong with you. Okay. So here we just have a picture of the plant material. We have the rods and cones of the eye and the melanin in the skin. More. Next. So let's talk about the light in the brain, get into the good stuff. This is the main source of the light's transmissions. One single nerve can attach to 10,000 other nerve endings. It's quite impossible that those messengers could all be 10,000 different discrete chemical messages. But with light, we're talking about fiber optics. There could be millions of connections with no problem. Brain cells also contain microtubules, which are like fiber optics, and actually people believe that these things might even be like microcomputers and have to do with the generation of consciousness. Photons accumulate in the cerebral spinal fluid and into the ventricles, these fluid-filled parts of the brain, and that connects directly to the pineal, which is our third eye, which is light-sensitive, and also generates what's called the God chemical, dimethyltryptophan, etc. So there's also another interesting phenomenon that the more intelligent the animal species is, the more it emits photons in the red end of the spectrum. They don't often measure the particular light frequency of the photons, but they do come in many colors. And the more red they are, the smarter the species is. In fact, now they're using this fact for something called photobiomodulation, where they're treating brain injury or Alzheimer's disease, or just to make you smarter, you can wear red helmets. And I went on Amazon, and you can buy them made in China just to make your hair grow. So I might be getting those next time I see you. Right now, if you closed your eyes and visualized a nice ball of light, they've shown definitively that the right side of your brain turns on with many, many photons. So visualization does increase biophotonism in the body and in the brain. There we go. Again, I need an extra 20 minutes now. Is the battery dead? Ooh, my fault. I still want another 20 minutes. Light body and consciousness. So there's a lot of different theories of consciousness, obviously. The one that's particularly interesting from our point of view, the spiritual point of view, is the endogenous light nexus theory, which is basically saying that this accumulation of light within the cerebral spinal fluid and these microscopic hairs within this area direct the photons in such a way as you get a holographic matrix, and this is kind of a repository for consciousness. Or as Deepak Chopra says, we are a non-local consciousness having a local experience. I'm supposed to get an extra 10 minutes. So here's a picture, here's a picture of the brain with these ventricles. The little red dot is the pineal gland, and very interestingly that the right and left saws or channels of the body seem to go right through those ventricles. So how do we create rainbows? Now, first of all, when you look online, you're going to see a lot of people that tell you they can give you the 10 stages of light body activation or the 8 signs that you've activated your light body. So there's this whole misconception that you already have a light body, all you have to do is activate it, or that various different capabilities like cities and so on, out-of-body travel, these psychic skills mean that you have a light body. No, you can develop these without any necessity of that development. So if you want to build a house, you need some raw materials, you need some workers running around with tools, you need a blueprint, and what else do you need? Have anybody here built a house? You need money, you need some funding. So when you're building a light body, we have our raw materials, which is our cells, our DNA, our mitochondria, these electromagnetic fields, our voltage, these photonic matrix, and of course the 5 elements. Our tools are the methodologies, the skillful means of Vajrayana, which is photonic work, visualization, phonomic work of mantra, energy manipulations, and of course focused consciousness. And we need a blueprint, which is none other than the Yidam. And we need financing, which is going to the higher level, cosmic level, enlightened forces that can aid us. We can't do this ourselves. So to say a little bit about each of these factors, I believe that a yidam is actually a photonic template, you could say a prefabricated template, in which we can pour our photons into. And that's why they say that when you die, you are born in the bardo into that particular light body. Let's throw it that way. It's not an arbitrary karmic or biological form like ours, but it is a living symbol. You know, we go through, every yidam is made out of meaningful parts. So we go through this process called remembrance, where we think that, yes, the 10 different arms represent these 10 different factors of the bodhisattva, etc., etc. And then, of course, it's a repository of sound and mind states. So we're creating the perfect template for the light body. Now, if you're at one of my previous lectures when we talked about mantric sound, we know that sound does not travel in little wiggly waves, but travels in spheres, and it goes at 268 miles an hour, which is enough to excite the atoms and create light. So everything you say turns into light and goes off into the cosmos, but also creates a photonic field within your own body. The nadis or tsas, the channels of energy in the body, are made of, they're physical, they're made of connective tissue, fascia, and so on, but also of this new discovery called the primo-vascular system. So are these little channels, different than lymphatics, different than veins and arteries, that connect through the entire body, that collect electromagnetic and photonic energy and so on. And of course they can become blocked and they can become constricted and atrophied with age, but they can also be moved around, and the physical yogas are one way to open them up. Prana, to me, is none other than electromagnetic force. It's really just voltage. Let's get that straight. So one of the ways we develop is accumulating this voltage in our body to be able to produce the photonic charges. I'm trying to go quickly here. This is not an area where, this is not an area where Vajrayana has done a lot of work, but in the system of Gurdjieff, for example, they describe how these air, food, and impressions, sensory impressions, are actually transformed from one form of energy, one level of energy, to another. And there's so many different topics within light body, but here we're talking about unification or integration. So we have these different right-left unifications that happen into the center. We have a top-bottom integration, where these two meet at the heart. And then we have an integration of the chakras. Chakras. You may not know that there are actually two different forms of chakras within Vajrayana. This is happening all again. There we go. So there's our one form of chakras, and then there's the one we do. And here's our elemental integration, where we have the mandala of higher consciousness, or the Buddha fields, the mandala of the mind and the body, mandala of the body, and integrating them together is kind of my version of enlightenment. All you have to do is put these together. It's quite simple, just 3 pancakes and you're done. The powers of light. Of course, we're very, very familiar with all of these wonderful superheroes and their extraordinary abilities. People don't realize that this is just a vague intuition of the real capacity of individuals to achieve these kinds of powers. Now, there's dozens of lists with literally hundreds of different possibilities, such as clairvoyance, clairaudience, seeing past lives, traveling to celestial realms, and all of these things. But we would say in some ways this is all just ordinary siddhi. The supreme siddhi is this pure light body where consciousness and luminosity are one. And I want to leave you with this parting thought. Your being is identical to the luminous expanse of Buddha mind at a lower resolution. Thank you.